Hello, my name is Carsten Werner. I'm reporting live here from the Schiller Institute conference in Pforzheim, Germany. And with me I have Dr. Tesmini, who is an author and researcher from Lisbon. And she's been speaking about how Iran is portrayed in the Western media and how much of this is basically propaganda. And one thing I wanted to ask her about is, because she mentioned it, is the threat of a world war. And in case this really plays out, the long discussed scenario of an Israeli attack on Iran, what do you think the potential dangers could be?
Well, other than regional conflagration, I think that it would be a case of mutually assured destruction. I think that even if the strikes were surgical, strategic, and just oriented towards the nuclear facilities, I think the repercussions of that would be severe. Iran would possibly withdraw, definitely withdraw from the non-proliferation treaty. There would be a surge of nationalist sentiment, a lot of resentment and hostility that would just brew because of this act of aggression against Iran. And I think that it would be some sort of war that would be not contained, and there's no way to calibrate the dangers. And I think that if Iran has not, which it hasn't, pursued nuclear energy in a military dimension, certainly that kind of pressure would prompt any state to worry about its security and to develop a weaponization program. So it would have absolutely the opposite effect.
Right. And you stress the fact that the 16 American intelligence services are saying there is no weapons program. So, and that's always been taught as the reason that Iran is a danger, they're building a nuclear weapon. So what do you think is behind this if that's not really the reason?
I think it's just regional domination, as Helga LaRouche has said, empire. It's a question of being able to secure energy resources for the future, and the unilateral hegemonic world system where you've got an Atlantic type polity that sits at the zenith of politics. Those are the reasons that we have this imbalance, and this is the reason why countries are being stripped of their resources with these wars based on flimsy evidence, as we saw in Iraq.
Yeah, that's what most people should have in mind, because everybody now knows that the weapons of mass destruction never existed. People laugh today about it, but they believe in the same thing, that, you know, Ahmadinejad is building a bomb, or the same thing in Syria, that you have a dictator suppressing his population. But one thing you also stressed, as a lot of other participants at the conference did, was the question of viewing the whole situation in a totally different light, namely, how could Iran actually be a partner in an international dialogue of civilizations? Why don't you say a few words about that?
Sure. I think that it's very important to recognize that Iran has a lot of soft power, something that the Western powers didn't have when they did go into Iraq and when they were trying to win the hearts and the minds of the people, ironically, through invasion. I think that Iran has linguistic, cultural, religious resources that could be of great help regionally in preventing further sectarian conflict. Iran would be a great party to these talks in creating a post-Arab Spring Middle East, where it would be a valuable contributor to creating regional stability, perhaps collaborating with Turkey, with Saudi Arabia. I think the fact is that Iran needs to be part of a greater strategy. It's time to actually include Iran in coming up with a roadmap for the future. And no longer can Iran be ostracized. It's a great power in every shape and form. It's a country with thousands of years of history. And to see just upstart countries like the US that are less than 250, 60 years old, telling Iran what to do, depriving it of its inalienable rights is quite ironic. So we need to turn the tables around and have a more constructive strategy.
Yeah, in a certain sense, it's very ironic because, as you just mentioned, I mean, Iran, in a certain sense, is the cradle of civilization. And as other speakers were also emphasizing, the Europe would not have existed in an intellectual form if it weren't for the Arab Renaissance, for example, that whole region rescuing the Platonic writings and other things, which are then translated into Arabic and then also was back translated later. So that's a real example of how this should work. And one last question I would like to ask you is, we had this very detailed presentation on the concrete infrastructure projects in that area. If you have any specific thoughts about that.
I'm not too familiar about it, but I think that His Excellency Ambassador Sheikh Attar did mention that there were projects underway, and I think that if we are to consider all the environmental and ecological issues that we have at hand, and the question of securing resources for the future, it all makes perfect sense that we need to be looking at the future generations and being part of that future generation, and not thinking that these are all privileged for the wise men say it's for future generations. We are part of the future generation, and I believe that Iran is a country that's always been at the head of progress, of technology, and it would welcome these initiatives. In fact, they could be initiatives, as we've said, in a not away from the political arena towards a less charged stage. Ecological issues, environmental issues to do with nature. I think these are common interests of humanity, and perhaps it's just an opening to get rival countries to talk, or at least to find subjects on which they have mutual interests.
The most striking thing we will discover is that we actually all eventually humans, yes, and we all need food, housing, and we all want a future. Our youth wants a future, and that's beyond the religious and ethnic. Yeah.
I think that to understand that we're all human and that we could all be affected by a thermonuclear war, I think that's something very basic, but people don't understand that a small trigger like that can really create devastation. And as Helga LaRouche said, extinction of this human species. We don't think about it, but these things happen all of a sudden with something small. And I think we're playing very dangerously, toying with these ideas, threatening each other, and it's not something to be joked around with. The repercussions are severe.
Good, then I think it's very good and necessary that you were here, that other people were here and discussing these kind of things.
To be part of this. I'm very happy to have been invited and to be part of this initiative, because it's so important to create awareness that this is not just theory, these are not just alarm tactics, this could be an eventuality, and there's so many other reasons for us to collaborate, and hopefully in the future panels we'll be discussing scientific collaboration as well, which could also be grounds of cooperation.
Yeah, we'll do so. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much.
And we see you more there. Bye.